Hey everyone, in today's tutorial I'm going to show you how you can use Jetpack Compose to build UI. Jetpack Compose is a new modern toolkit by Google to create layout. With this, there is no point of creating layout in XML and then inflating it because here you create everything right in the Kotlin code. And let's see what we are going to build today. So we are going to build a screen something like this, where we have a top app bar with title and icons. Below that we have an image, and then below that we have some sort of pattern, and inside that we have two editable text field, username and password. At the bottom we have a bottom bar, and that is having a docked fab button. So let's see how we can build this. So let's start with the code. So first of all, the part is again on create. So just like an XML where you have set content, now here also you have set content. Now inside the set content, you define all the composable which you want to draw on screen. So @composable is an annotation which you have to add for any other function which contains the UI components. By this way, you differentiate between a normal function and the composable function. Composable function is a function which takes all those UI components which has to be drawn on screen. And the good thing here is that it's not an annotation processor, which means that no slow build speed. It's actually a Kotlin compiler plugin which understands @composable. So you can think it like a special keyword through that you define that this function is containing the piece of code which has to be drawn on screen. So before switching to the composable, let me tell about the remember. There's something called as positional memorization, which means that cache the output based on the input parameters. Because this clearly makes sense. If the input parameters are not changing, if the values remain same, then the function is going to return the same output. So there is no point of recalculating it. And now, how do you do this work is you can use a remember keyword and say that you have something called as an integer object, and the moment you pass this integer object to remember, now what it means is that whenever the value of remember changes, execute the lambda part and get the result back. But if the value of this num that remains same always, if that is not changing, then there is no point of executing this lambda part because it already understands that it has executed the code before and has cached the result. So rather than recomputing it, just give the result. But how about if you do not give a parameter here? Which means that now it doesn't depend on the input parameter. So how do it will execute the lambda part? So if you do not give a parameter to this, then it will execute this part only once and will give you the result. And we want this exactly here. We want this, and this is really useful, say if you are running the function over and over, because there's another concept called as recomposition. Then for certain things, you do not want it to get initialized over and over. And during those situations, this is really helpful. Mutable state of. So whenever you call this mutable state of and give the default value to this, it automatically set an observer. So theme state is of mutable state of Boolean type, and it is having an observer, which means that whenever I say that theme state dot value equals to true or false, then it will automatically recompose that function. So by this way, you can do certain changes on script. Okay, now let's start with the theme. So as soon as you create a project, it will automatically give you some default theme. This default theme is like whatever is the name of the project which you have given, append with theme. Now you can change the app theme here inside this, where you define all sort of things, that what is the colors, typography, shapes. Based on your app theme, you can completely customize this. So I'm not going to customize it, I'm leaving it as it is. Now let me come to Scaffold. Scaffold is really useful if you want to align few of the things which it offers by default, like the top bar, bottom bar, or the navigation drawer, body content. So all those things, or even the fab, so all such things you need to align it based on your need. But how about if you could get a function which can do all those things for you? If you want to align it to its original position, like you want top tab bar to be there on the top of the screen, bottom to be at the bottom, fab to be the center or the right of the bottom app bar with docked. So all such things you can do it using Scaffold. So you need not to bother about positioning the views on screen because all those things is taken care for you. So let's create the top bar first. So in the top bar, I am passing a composable. Let me show you this. So composable is nothing but a normal traditional function. There's nothing new in this. Only new change here is that rather than having some sort of computation, it is having the UI components. The components which will get rendered on screen. And to make compiler aware about this, you have to use @composable. But how do you differentiate between a normal function and a composable? Now, this could be quite confusing. So the naming convention comes into action here. For composable, you create a name with capital letters, and for normal function, create with small case. This is just like a camel case. Like here, instead of having L as small letter, I have it as capital one. So which give an indication that this is a composable function. Another fact about composable is that you cannot call composable function from any other function which is not composable. So if you are already aware of suspend functions, if you have used coroutine before, then it acts in the same manner. Suspend should also get called from either suspending function or from coroutine builder. Same type of concept applies here also. Okay, now let's create the top app bar. So top app bar is the system provided composable where you can provide the modifier, text, rows, all sort of things. So top bar just give you an empty bar, just like an empty view on screen. Inside this, you can add any sort of composable. So here I'm creating a composable called as text, where I'm giving the text value, the style for text, and modifier. I'll come to modifier later on. So this text is something which you are seeing it at the top left side, Jetpack login. And then at the end of this, I want two icons. So that you can create using row and provide as many icons you want to provide. And also the click listener. So there are other ways to get the resource. Because I'm using the vector resource, so I'm calling vector resource. If you have a PNG or JPG, then you can call image resource. So this was all about creating a top app bar. Now let's see about the bottom app bar. So let me switch to the bottom app bar. So same concept applies here also. Bottom app bar will just give an empty view. Now inside empty view, you can create the views like the text or icons, all sorts of things you have to provide it explicitly. Okay, now let me talk about modifier. So modifier is just like a normal Kotlin object, but this can do a lot of work for you. You can make the component clickable, you can set the gravity, you can give padding, you can give, say, the width, height, the preferred width and height, all sort of things right from a single modifier. Now it can form like a chain. For example, let me again switch back to the top app bar. Now you can see the modifier here. For text, I've given a gravity that I want this to be center vertical, and I also want to have a padding for this, where you can give a normal overall padding or to the start, top, bottom, and end. So not just this, there are other ways to chain this modifier. Like here, I want this outline text field match parent for the width, So I've given like fill max width again on the modifier with some padding. So modifier is really a useful concept because now you need not to bother about setting margin, padding, and all sort of things with different composable. It's just a single object, and on that object you just call in based on your requirement. Now let me talk about the body content. So body content is the center part of the screen. So I've talked about creating the top app bar and then the bottom app bar. Now let me talk about the body content. But before that, let me talk about the fab which is coming at the center. So this is the specification which you have to give. Is floating action button docked? If you give it true, it will just overlap with the bottom app bar. And if you just make it false, which is the default one, then it will go over the bottom app bar. And floating action button is just like another composable where you give like the click listeners and the icon. Finally, the position. Where do you want to align it? Either to the center or to the right side of the screen. The cut shape which you are seeing, that is coming because of the bottom app bar. So inside this bottom app bar, I have specified the cutout shape. And that's why it is giving this circular shape. Okay, now let's talk about the body content. So now I have a column because at the top I want some sort of space so that I can pull down the image to certain distance. So for that I'm using the spacer with a preferred height of 28 dp so that it could leave a space of 28 dp on top. Then I'm creating a box. So box is really useful if you want to surround the border of it. Like here you can see this image is having a border of purple color. So box is really useful for that. You can define the width of the border stroke, the color which you want to. Okay, now let me talk about another box. So the bottom box which is having the username and a password. So this box is here again to set the border. The border here is of 4 dp, color is primary, and to follow a shape and along that shape create the strokes. So you can see the cutout shape with some border. That is all coming because of the box. And after that, it's having a modifier, which means that first of all, fill the max size like width and height as match parent and match parent, and then change the height to the wrap content. So by this way, rather than occupying the full screen, it is occupying only the wrap content part and then aligning to the bottom of the screen. So this was about a box, an empty box. So this box is empty. Now inside this box, I want to have two editable fields for username and password. So for that, I've created a column. Now inside this column, again, I want to give some sort of space at the top, then the username, after that password, and finally some space at the bottom. Now you're seeing this as 164 dp. It's all because from the bottom of the screen, it takes this space. Now let's see about the individual components like username field and the password field. Now this is really an important one. For the outline text field. Now outline text field is like you have a text field with a boundary, and as soon as you tab on it, you see the hint will get floated on top. And not just this, now you can also add a placeholder. Say that the hint is like username, and as soon as user taps on the field, you're floating this username to the top. And then if you want to give some sort of hint to them that what could be the username, like the email ID or some other sort of numbers, so that you can add as a placeholder. This placeholder will get replaced as soon as user starts typing any characters. So let's see each of them now. So I have used outline text field so that it will have a boundary and a floating hint. Inside this, it is having one parameter called as value. Now this is really important one, because if you want to take the value outside this field, because eventually on a button click, you may need this value back. So that value you assign here, and on value change is just like having a text watcher. As soon as any value is getting changed, you can assign it back to this value, and that you can do using username state.value equals to it. So it is going to give you the new updated value. After that, you can also provide the label. Inside this label, you can have a text, and again, if you want to write text directly, write it, or if you want to load it from the string.xml, then use string resource. So this label takes another composable. So you can add a text or a button or any sort of things, but text is really a good candidate here. Modifier. So now I want this text field to fill the width of the screen, like width as match parent. So for that, I'm specifying like fill max width, and then leave some space at the right and the end of the screen. So for that, it's padding. There's a bit of difference between the padding for Android traditional layout system and here. Here you can think padding as a margin, and sometimes it can act like a padding also. It all depends on where do you want to add this, and it really depends on that. Now here I'm setting padding right on the text field. So what it's going to do is that it will leave some space at the left and right, and it will act as if it is giving a margin of 16 dp towards the end and the start. After that, I also want to have a placeholder. So as soon as user taps on it, the hint will flow up and it will show some sort of hint to the user that they need to type their email ID. Also, I can give the leading icon, which will be at the front of this editable field, which you can see it here. Before the hint, there's an icon. That's all coming because of this leading icon. So that was about the username field. And same goes true for the password field. However, we cannot show password to the user directly. So you should see something like a star or dots because we don't want to reveal the password. So everything remains same here. The value, on value changed, labels, modifier. But the major difference is visual transformation. Here I'm giving this like a password visual transformation. And just by giving this, when user type anything here, it will show dot 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 rather than giving the original content which they are typing. So by this way, you can create this layout and all those things under 200 lines of code. So I hope this might be useful for you to understand about how you can create UI using Jetpack Compose. And if you have liked this video, then hit the like button, subscribe the channel, and stay tuned for the upcoming videos.